After that first tangle with the strange item things, my time at Evan's place was pretty smooth. I stayed there all throughout April. John came by to double check my blood values at one point, and I was eventually allowed to roam free throughout most of the house, except for the basement. Later on, as we grew more confident that there were no immediate threats, we agreed that it was okay for me to leave this house every now and then. We had a few security checks, like a check-in and a check-out, but I didn't have to use it. Going for a walk or getting a hot dog is usually not that dangerous. Minnesota spring was on the cusp of turning into Minnesota summer. Trees were coming alive, grass was turning green, and I could see various plant life come to life all throughout the town. It seemed to be a bit of a special occasion as people started putting up vases and pots preparing for the summer seeds to grow. There was this one local song that half of all people seemed to whistle, but I can't put my finger on what it was or what the lyrics were. They were jolly and rhymed. Me and you, blue, true, something like that. About a week into May, as I came back to Evan's place, I could hear him rustling around the kitchen. It was almost dark out, and he never left the basement in the daylight. Since the night where I'd been pulled out a window, I hadn't seen him out in the open. He was a bit more welcoming though, and he didn't mind speaking to me in person. He still had trouble sticking to one voice though. Either way, I stopped just short of the kitchen to give him time to retreat into his basement. This time, he didn't. "You can come in," he said, this time in a feminine voice. "Just don't look at me." "All right." I sat down by the kitchen table with my back turned. Evan was going through the various pots and pans looking for something. "You need any help?" I asked. "No," he answered, this time with the voice of a child. "I'm fine." He shut a drawer with a frustrated sigh and leaned back. I held true to my word and didn't look at him. I couldn't help seeing parts of him in the reflection of the kitchen window though. It was hard not to notice the various feelers and antennae poking out of him. "Why were you exiled?" Evan asked. "Were your surrogate family deviants?" "No," I admitted. "They're pretty normal. Too normal, really." "I don't understand," Evan said, now changing his voice to an old man. "How can one be too normal and or average?" "Well, they represent a demographic that doesn't respond well to change." "Change?" he asked. "What change?" "Nothing really. Their perception of me, I guess. I discovered a part of me that they refused to accept." Evan pondered for a moment before he stepped up behind me. There was a comforting tap on my shoulder with cactus-like hairs burning my neck, deeply unpleasant. "Change is always reductive to the stone," he said. "It makes mountains into boulders, boulders into rocks, rocks into gravel, gravel into sand. But to water, change can make it tough as ice." "Very insightful," I smiled. "You read that online?" "No," he scoffed. "Books." The next morning, I woke up just past 10 a.m. This was alarming for a number of reasons. First off, Evan always woke me up early in the morning. Secondly, he always offered me some sort of breakfast. Today, he had done neither. I got dressed and hurried out of bed. "Evan?" I called out. "Evan, are you there?" No response. Not in person, not through the many speakers he'd placed throughout the house. It was eerily quiet. He wasn't downstairs, and he wasn't outside. I made a mental note to ask him about the stalks growing in the garden, though. They looked strange, but Evan was nowhere to be seen. That's when I noticed the basement door was open. This hadn't happened before. Evan always closed it, and he was adamant about protecting his space. Leaving it open could mean he'd hurt himself or something serious had happened. I hurried back upstairs and fished my burner phone out of my pocket. I had to get John on the line just in case. He picked up in 2 rings. "Evan's gone," I said. "Something's up." "You sure?" John asked. "You sure he isn't hiding?" "He left his basement unlocked." There was a short pause. I could hear my pulse rising. I barely knew anything about Evan, but he seemed decent enough. Besides, he'd taken good care of me for the better part of a month. If I were to survive this year, I need people like him on my side. "I'll be there in 20, said John. "Don't touch anything. Put the phone in the microwave." "There's no microwave." "Then pick it apart and put the pieces in a glass of water." I did as I was told, even if it felt ridiculously wasteful. At that point, I knew better than to question John and his directions. He knew this world better than I did. Waiting for John to come over, I walked around the ground floor of the house. I couldn't help myself peeking into the basement. I could hear whirring machinery and see the edge of a stinking fluorescent light. It reminded me of John's workshop. Maybe the two had something in common. "Evan," I called out. "If you want me to come downstairs, you gotta say something." There was no response. He really was gone. I met John outside as he pulled into the driveway. He had this odd black beanie that I hadn't seen before and a different pair of sunglasses than usual. His hair tucked into a short ponytail. Had it always been that long? "Check the door while I'm down there," he said as he walked past me. "Don't want anything closing in on us." "You're making me a doorstop?" "A doorstop with a voice and a convenient lubricant." "You mean blood?" "Yes." We walked back inside and John headed straight for the basement. I stayed upstairs checking the door. A few minutes passed, then there was a clicking noise. A little LED light in the doorway turned green. "It's fine, you can come down," John called. "Watch your step." Just a few steps down and I was struck by this awful cold. I could see my breath before I even got halfway down the stairs. Whatever was down there had to drain an enormous amount of power to keep things this cold. I'll never forget the first time I saw Evan's basement. Bright white rubber floors, gray concrete walls, and a blinding amount of overhead lights. About 75% of the floor space was covered with 3-inch thick cables running in and out of strange machines. Some of the stuff looked to be from the late 70s, while other machines seemed to be cobbled up from homemade parts and refuse. It was this absurd combination of military-grade Black Ops Roswell tech and, well, high school science project crap. And screens goddamn everywhere with a clear space for someone to be standing in the middle of the room. Someone who could reach and use at least 8 different keyboards at once. And at the very end of the room, there was a mirror with an ornate and beautiful gold-colored frame. It was perfectly round, and at least 5 feet in diameter. It was clearly important enough to be placed in the middle of the furthest wall in clear sight. A dozen of the thick cables were plugged into it, and it gave off a light hum. John just looked at me with a defeated shrug. "I think I found the issue." I walked up to the mirror. I could see the bright room reflected at me, and there was a slight vibration to the surface. Made me want to touch it, but I restrained myself. "Mind telling me what's happening?" I asked, in a way that I can understand. "Sure." He walked up to the various screens and started to check sets of measurements, calculations, and data storage. I could tell most of it was green, which had to be good. "When you're viewing a reflection of yourself, you're technically functioning on half a mind," he said. "For a brief moment, you exist simultaneously in two opposites, and your thoughts are shared within the space of 2 reflected copies. Technically, that leaves both you and the other you with half an open, albeit synchronized mind." "Wait, so you mean to say that it's not just an image?" "Of course it is," he smiled. "Who said images can't think? Anyway, it's similar to what happens when you sleep. You become susceptible. It wouldn't work on Evan though, or me." John got to a third screen. A blinking orange prop came to life on an old black console window. "But there is a loss," John continued. "Kind of like when you use a credit card. There is a bit of capacity peeled off. That's why people who spend a lot of time looking into mirrors can seem a bit distant and dumb. They literally lose a tiny bit of capacity. It recovers in time, but..." "So you mean vain people are literally losing brain capacity?" "Let's boil it down to that, sure." John pointed to the screen as he made a mental note. "There's the problem," he said. "Someone pulled the plug." "What plug?" "On the other side. Evan put up a turbine to harvest some of the capacity drop-off. Near limitless source of energy, as long as we keep the scaling low. And someone pulled the plug? Bingo. We just gotta start it up so we can get back out. John tapped away at the keyboard, checked the manual, and entered a command. This ought to do it. He'll be back in a snap. Wait, he's in the mirror? Like father, like son. How else would he set up the turbine? If you're gonna ask questions, keep up with the answers. John smacked enter on the keyboard, and the entire room went dark. The machines died. My eyes completely disoriented me, not knowing what to do with this sudden darkness. All the background noise faded, leaving me with nothing but my breath. I kept as still as possible, trying to hear John. Okay, so that wasn't it, he said. I was relieved to hear something other than myself. John took a few steps, only to stop. You hear that? He said. Sounded like there was a slight tapping noise, like little rocks dropping on the floor. Then a sudden chill, like a cold wave pushing through the room. John, I whispered. John, are you? Eerily monotone voice, rumbling with an unnatural vibrato, like the hum of a wasp's wings. There was no response. Somewhere in the room, a wrench dropped from the table, like a starting pistol to a race. Run! Like so many times before, I did what John told me. I heard something scrambling to move across the floor to get him. There was a crunching noise, followed by a tearing flesh and metallic snap. There was a painful screech, like a man stuck in a dying 56K modem. It sent chills up my spine, even more so than the cold wave. But I had to run, so I ran. Up the stairs, through the main hall, out the front door. That's when it hit me that it was still dark, even though I was standing outside. Wasn't it early morning? Looking up, I could see no sun and no stars, just a black canvas. Everything looked a bit different. The grass looked taller and had a blue tint to it. The trees had gray bark with black leaves. There was an oppressive stench of ammonia, and the more I looked, the more unnatural things came into view. A writhing geometric shape in the distance, clouds slithering like snakes across the sky. Somewhere in the distance, an animal inhaled so sharply that it echoed like a howl. But there were parts of Evan's house and yard still there. The house was largely intact, and I could see the damaged greenhouse in the backyard. There were impressions in the gravel from where John had parked his car. From inside the house, I could hear something scrambling up the basement stairs, stumbling and falling over itself. I hurried into the backyard, slipping on a pitch-black vine as I tried to keep my mouth shut. The ammonia smell was so strong that it burned my eyes. As I blinked, the world changed. One moment I was back in Evan's bright backyard, and the next I was hiding around the corner of his dark house. One moment I could hear something coming for me. The next there was birdsong, sunshine, and fresh grass under my feet. Finally I stopped. I leaned against the brick foundation, feeling the rough texture scratch my nails. Keeping completely still and holding my breath, I managed to stay there in the yard. The chickadees were singing. I held my breath as long as I could, keeping still as possible as to not be whisked back. But lungs aren't meant to last that long. I could still taste the ammonia. I was losing my grip. I was going back there, like it or not. As my face turned red, I noticed an old brick just within arm's reach. I had to try something. I exhaled and reached for it. The moment I touched it, I was back in that damn place. The smell hit me like a sack of hammers, and my eyes had trouble adjusting to the dark. No more than 6 feet away, there was a tall, slick shadow looking down on me. Something vaguely human, like the memory of a body. That voice again. The shape lunged at me. I curled up into a ball, abandoning even the slightest attempt to throw that brick. A hand brushed against my neck as the chickadees came back with a song. I could feel the warm sun against my back. Next time I dipped back in there, it might catch me. It could rip me apart. What the hell had it done to John? I drew a short breath, moving into the dark just long enough for something sharp to cut my lower lip. I was back under the sun, looking at my blood-smeared hand. I instinctively recoiled back into the dark. My eyes teared from the ammonia as I crawled backwards, seeing the elongated arm strike where I had just been moments before. I tossed my brick at it, and the shape just swatted it away like it was nothing. It almost seemed insulted, taking a moment to just stare at me. I could see a dark eye moving about its fluid shape, blue teeth hidden behind an impossibly wide mouth slit. I got back on my feet as the sky turned black. It was fast. It was coming for me. I wasn't coming back from the dark this time. I was stuck. It was going to run me down and tear me to pieces. I could feel it. It wanted something I had. It needed desperately to kill the Yearwalker. As I rounded the corner of the house and dashed through the front yard, I heard the steps behind me suddenly grind to a halt with a screech. As I turned around, I noticed the darkness flicker in and out. Hot, cold, bright, dark, that burning ammonia making my nose bleed. Somewhere inside the house, I heard a rattling voice. "North!" The dark shape scrambled to get back inside the house, claws ripping into rotting wood, panic screams, a shock wave ruffling the hair on my neck, a painful warmth. Fire! Then nothing. I was standing outside in the bright sun of May, and Evan's house was gone. Everything down to the foundation had just been smoothed over, like a vacant lot of grass in a broken greenhouse. The grass was singed and ashen, but there was no fire, no smoke, not a trace of what happened in that basement. No sign of Evan or John. At first I just stood there. I called out to John like a baby bird trying to find its mother. I fell to my knees, brushing my hands through the grass, trying to calm myself, but there was just nothing there. I was on my own, and all I had to go on was north. John had taken the keys to his car along with him, a car that was still in the driveway. For a moment, I just screamed and sunk my fingers into my eyes, and for a brief second, the smell of ammonia whiffed back into my nose. I didn't want to take any more chances. I couldn't stay there. I just ran. I followed a small dirt road north. First I ran, then I jogged. After what felt like hours, I was just dragging my feet along, trying to keep myself upright. I had no food, no water, and no idea where I was going. I could still taste the ammonia. I don't know how long I kept going. The sky started to go dark, and I could almost see the slithering clouds overhead. Was it just night? Or was it that other place? I was on my own, and there was no telling what could find me out in the middle of nowhere. Was this even north? By night, it got so dark that I had to use what remained of my phone as a flashlight. My hands were shivering, almost dropping it. Finally, I spotted a wooden sign up ahead. It simply read, St. Gall,